If you ask me, Paulo, what is in being in the world, in you, that calls your own attention to you, I said, I would say to you that I am a curious being. That I have been a curious being. But in a certain moment of the process of being curious, in order to understand the others, I discover that I have to create in myself a certain virtue without which it's difficult for me to understand the others. The virtue of tolerance. It is through the exercise of tolerance that I discover the rich possibility of doing things and learning different things with different people. Being tolerant is not a question of being naive. On the contrary, it is a duty to be tolerant, an ethical duty, a historical, a political duty. But it does not demand from me to lose my personality.
The groundbreaking educational theory of Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy questions established ideas about teaching and learning. Awareness, also known as critical consciousness, is a key component of Freire's methodology since it highlights the significance of comprehending and challenging the social, political, and economic systems that influence our daily lives. According to Freire, education should be a cooperative process of discussion and introspection rather than a one-way transfer of knowledge from instructor to pupil. By enabling students to critically evaluate both their personal experiences and the outside world, this dialogical approach to student fosters a great awareness of everyone and their place in the society.
Another key component of Freire's critical pedagogy is the connection of theory and practice or practice. Students are inspired to take up the action to confront social injustices and bring about the constructive change in their communities through practice. Students can apply theoretical concepts to real-world situations through their experiential learning approach, which promotes a deeper and more meaningful comprehension of the subject matter. Through application, students move from being passive knowledge consumers to active contributors to their own education.
The concept of the problem-posing education is another essential component of Freire's critical pedagogy. In contrast to traditional education, which frequently uses a banking model in which teachers impart knowledge to obedient pupils, problem-posing education pushes students to think, critically pose questions, and challenge preconception. This method creates a more lively and participatory learning atmosphere where information is jointly created via discussion and teamwork.
Even though it is for me, and it would be for me also a great honor to be understood as a specialist in literacy, I have to say no, because my main preoccupation since I started working 40 years, almost 45 years ago, my main preoccupations had to do with the critical understanding of education. Of course, thinking of education in general, I also had to think about literacy, which is a fundamental chapter of education as a whole. Nevertheless, I also had strong experiences in this chapter of adult literacy, for example, in Brazil and out of Brazil. But the more I think of what I did, what I proposed, the more I understand myself much more as a thinker and a kind of epistemologist proposing a critical way of thinking and a critical way of teaching, of knowing, to the teachers in order for them to work differently with the students.
In addition, critical pedagogy is essential for strengthening oppressed groups and undermining oppressive structures, in addition to giving students the knowledge and abilities they need to thrive in the real world. Freire taught that education should provide them the ability to question and critically analyze the system of power that uphold justice. Students who cultivate a critical consciousness are better equipped to identify and oppose oppression, which leads to the creation of a society that is more just and equal.
Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy places significant emphasis on the reciprocal and mutual nature of the relationship between teachers and students, in contrast to the conventional hierarchical relationship in which the teacher is viewed as the exclusive source of authority. Freire highlighted the value of communication and cooperation between educators and learners. According to this concept, the teacher acts as a facilitator rather than an information dictator, with both parties seeing themselves as co-creators of knowledge. This method not only encourages professors to listen to their students' experiences and viewpoints, but it also gives students the power to take charge of their education. Freire taught that education should become a more democratic and liberating process for everyone involved by cultivating a culture of respect and cooperation between people.
Socrates, one of the founding fathers of Western philosophical thought, was on trial. Many Athenians believed he was a dangerous enemy of the state, accusing the philosopher of corrupting the youth and refusing to recognize their gods. However, Socrates wasn't feared for claiming to have all the answers, but rather for asking too many questions. While he loathed formal lectures, the philosopher frequently engaged friends and strangers in lengthy conversations about morality and society. These discussions weren't debates, nor would Socrates offer explicit advice. In fact, the philosopher often claimed to know nothing at all, responding to his partner's answers only with further questions. But through this process, Socrates probed their logic, revealing its flaws and helping both parties reach a more robust understanding. These insightful questions made Socrates beloved by his followers. Two of his students, Plato and Xenophon, were so inspired that they replicated their mentor's process in fictional dialogues. These invented exchanges provide perfect examples of what would come to be known as the Socratic method. In one of these fabricated dialogues, Socrates is conversing with a young man named Euthydemus, who is confident that he understands the nature of justice and injustice. Socrates probes the student's values by asking him to label actions such as lying and theft as just or unjust. Euthydemus confidently categorizes them as injustices, but this only prompts another question. Is it just for a general to deceive or pillage a hostile army? Euthydemus revises his assertion. He claims that these actions are just when done to enemies, and unjust when done to friends. But Socrates isn't finished. He asks the young man to consider a commander lying to his troops to boost their morale. Before long, Euthydemus is despondent. It seems that every answer leads to further problems, and perhaps he's not quite sure what constitutes justice after all. In employing this question-oriented approach, Socrates described himself as a midwife, whose inquiries assist others in giving birth to their ideas. His method of questioning draws out an individual's unexamined assumptions and then challenges those biases. It doesn't always provide definitive answers, but the method helps clarify the questions and eliminate contradictory or circular logic. And by following a line of inquiry where it logically leads, both the question asker and answerer can end up in unexpected places. This technique isn't limited by the conversation's content, making it incredibly useful in numerous fields. During the Renaissance, the method was used to teach clinical medicine. Students proposed their rationale for different diagnoses, while a doctor questioned their assumptions and moderated discussion. In this model, the method could even produce conclusive results. This same approach was later used in other sciences, such as astronomy, botany, and mathematics. Following the Protestant Reformation, it was adapted to tackle abstract questions of faith. In the 19th century, the method became an essential part of American legal education. Professors explored students' understanding of judicial reasoning by challenging them with unforeseen hypothetical situations. This approach is still used today by the Supreme Court to imagine the unintended impacts of passing a law. The Socratic method can be adapted to teach almost any topic that relies on critical reasoning, but its success depends on the teacher employing it. An effective Socratic educator must be well-versed in their subject. Rather than bullying their students or showing off their superior intellect, they should be modest, genuinely curious, and affirming of every contribution. In this regard, Socrates himself may not have been the most subtle Socratic teacher. Historians believe he was deeply critical of Athens' particular brand of democracy and known to pass those concerns on to his followers. These subversive beliefs were distorted in public forums and thought to have inspired two of his pupils to treasonous ends. It was likely for these ideas Socrates was brought to trial and eventually sentenced to death. But even on his deathbed, artists depict a serene philosopher, ever curious to explore the ultimate question. What was life like in Socrates' Athens? Travel back in time to 427 BCE and experience how an ancient democracy made its decisions.
In conclusion, Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy is a revolutionary philosophy of education that places a strong emphasis on problem posing, praxis, and critical consciousness. A better comprehension of social concerns and a commitment to good social change are fostered by Freire's method, which gives students the tools to critically engage with their experiences and the world around them. Critical pedagogy transforms education into an instrument for social justice, emancipation, and empowerment.
Nucleus of my thought, of the understanding of my own presence in the reality. That is, how, for example, could I change the knowledge which or the experience which makes me know that I am curious? No, I was a curious boy, and I am a curious old man. That is, my curiosity never stops. Maybe in the last moments of my life, I will be curious to know what it means to die.